You're watching Get Ahead of the Game. Nail your practice placement interviews. Produced by GP Supervision Australia and presented by Leonie Chamberlain and Jen Flakemore. We would like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which this recording was produced and pay our respects to their elders, past, present, future, and their families.
Hi everybody, my name's Leonie Chamberlain. I am COO of GPSA and also your practice manager representative on the GPSA board. Helping me today and working alongside me is the lovely Jen Flakemore. She is our practice manager lead at GPSA. So Jen is the person who's working behind the scenes, getting all of the wonderful resources together and updated for you. So why are we providing this information? Because we've heard a lot over the last few years that people are concerned about the amount of competition amongst practices, that registrars are coming in with some fairly high demands and practices aren't quite sure how they should manage that. And that we understand that there are financial pressures in general practice, and there are many ways other than simply offering a higher dollar figure that you can add value to your offering. So we thought it would be appropriate that we share this and give everyone else the opportunity to share their own ideas and perhaps some tips and tricks to make the practice attractive to incoming registrars. I do understand that for some people, sharing what it is that makes your practice attractive might seem to be taking away your competitive edge. But I think that this year especially, there is going to be a higher number of registrars than there has been in the past. The offering is actually oversubscribed. So hopefully this year, no one will miss out. And some of this information may simply make sure that you, you and the registrar get the best match, because it's not just about getting a registrar in your practice, it's about getting the right registrar in your practice. Before we start, I thought it's important to let you know what is coming for next year. You may have heard that the federal government has put a great deal of investment into attracting doctors into GP training. These incentives are waiting ministerial approval, but it is our understanding that they will be in place for semester 1, 2026. So the first one is a $30,000 incentive for doctors to sign on to join the AGPT program, and that will be paid to them in semester 1. Paid study leave, 5 days or 38 hours per year of paid study leave. So that's not the practices paying that, that's being paid through Services Australia, but it is something that registrars will be wanting time off for, so leave without pay in order to be able to access that one. And paid parental leave, 20 weeks of paid parental leave. And the goal is to make general practice as attractive as staying within the hospital system in relation to those entitlements. And as I've said, there's an oversubscription for next year, so it would indicate that some of these incentives are already working. If you want some more details on that, the website is there. But as I've mentioned, we are waiting ministerial approval on that. Yes, Jen.
Sorry, Leonie. Would you be able to move a little bit closer to the screen? People are having a bit of trouble hearing you.
Okay, sorry guys. My laptop
Thank you.
a little bit of it's a bit of a problem, and so I'm using a webcam. Is that any better? Yeah, thank you. So in relation to the upcoming negotiations, what are the minimum terms you can offer? So the NTCER base rates are 44.79% of billings or receipts, and there's a minimum hourly rate that's stipulated there, which increases according to the registrar's level of training. Superannuation guarantee of 12%, and that's paid on both the base rate and the top-up. Educational release for all mandatory workshops in normal hours. top-ups calculated no less frequently than monthly, and statutory entitlements for annual leave and personal leave, and all the other types of leave as well. So compassionate leave, domestic violence leave, anything else that an employee under the NES is entitled to. That's the minimum. But there's lots of other things that you can do, and there's lots of other things that registrars ask for that may make a difference to what they end up being remunerated. The first thing I think that is really important for people to be aware of is your practice profile is your advertisement to registrars. And it's really important that you actually know what it is that you've got to offer. And if you're actually walking the walk. So when was the last time you actually looked at your practice? Not only the interior and the exterior environment, but also philosophically, and what your values are. Do you have a mission and vision statement that's on your website? And if so, do they actually reflect what you do in practice? Where are you and where do you want to go? So are you a small practice that's hoping to build up? Are you an established practice who is looking to diversify? Or have you already actually ticked your goals and you're quite comfortable where you are? It's really important that you're aware of your identity and whether or not it reflects what you want it to reflect, because if you don't know what it is that you've got to offer, it's really hard to sell it to other people. One thing that I've noticed at our practice, it's really, really easy to walk past things and not see them if you see them every day. So if there's weeds in your garden, you're probably not seeing it, but somebody who's new to your practice can see it. So getting somebody else to just come in and sit down in your waiting room and give you some feedback on what the environment was like, both the physical and noise levels and things like that. It might actually take somebody from outside your practice to come in and give you some really honest feedback to point out to you areas that might be a really easy improvement. Do your homework. It is really important that you look at these things. So what are you offering? Why do you think you are, or perhaps aren't, the practice of choice? You know, have you listed your pros and cons for yourself and then use those when you're writing your practice profile? Obviously don't list those cons, but the things that, you know, you think make you stand out from the crowd. So do your research, ask your current and past registrars if they actually agree with your assessment. You might think that you're offering an amazing training experience, but the registrars might not agree with that. You might think that you are modern and state-of-the-art, and they might say, actually, you know what, the computer crashes, you know, quite frequently, and in my last practice that never happened. So things that we get used to, they might point out to us as things that we could actually rectify or improve on. Compare what else is being offered by other practices in the area. Benchmarking is difficult, I know, but hopefully if you're in an area where competition is not as great, or if you've got some people who are, you know, you get along really well with, that aren't competing with you based on location, benchmarking is a really good thing just to make you aware of where you might be missing the mark. But remember that it is really hard to compare unless practices are offering pretty much exactly the same as far as size, billings, and support. And acknowledge what you can't change. You know, if your building's 80 years old, you're not going to be able to compete against the building that, you know, is brand spanking new and has the beautiful hard floors and coffee machines and so forth. If you don't have money to do renovations to spruce things up, you just have to accept that. You can't change everything. So acknowledge what you can't change and just focus on the things that you can. So, next slide. Not sure if that's different. So your practice profile is your advertisement. I was speaking to Jen just before we started about somebody who came up to me at a practice managers conference a couple of years ago and said, oh, it's so hard because our registrars, they have to do on call at the hospital. And, one day they might see someone who's been kicked by a horse, and then the next day, they've got the little kids coming in, and, there's just so much variety. And I said, well, if you make that sound like a bad thing, then they're going to think it's a bad thing. But that to me sounds like a wonderful learning opportunity for a registrar. Use your practice profile as your advertisement, but make sure that it actually is written in a positive frame. So Maurice from GPSA has gotten me onto AI, and I use it for just about everything now. In that I would write my practice profile, and then I would put it into AI and ask it to make it more attractive. And it's amazing just what a turn of phrase and a couple of changes in words can do to turn something from a negative to a positive. But with everything with AI, please make sure that you proofread it. Sometimes you do get some really interesting things coming out of it that you may not have intended. But either, use AI, or if you've got a friend who's in marketing or someone who's really active on social media or something like that, ask them to read your practice profile and to give you feedback on it. It's really important. It's free advertising, and it's what the registrars are using to determine who they apply to. Get testimonials from recent registrars, and ask for permission to pass on their details to prospective hires. I've often been asked to provide details of current or previous registrars. Please don't give out their details without their permission, but most of them are pretty happy to do so. And be aware that, as well as asking us directly, the registrars are talking amongst themselves. They have their own Facebook page, they have their own communities, they'll have their study groups, their workshop groups if they're not in the GPT, coming straight into GPT-1. So they are talking amongst themselves. But if you can actually say, here's the phone numbers of our 5 most recent registrars, feel free to give them a call and ask them about their experiences. The prospective registrars will be pretty impressed by that and know that you've got nothing to hide, that you're being really transparent. So that's a great one, and one that I would be getting on to now, to those previous registrars if they're no longer in your practice, and asking for permission to share their details. And find out what's important to the registrars. And it will differ according to their level of training. Finding out from your current or previous registrars what it was that made your practice attractive to them will give you a little bit of insight into what you could be offering in the future. I think it's really important when we ask for people's feedback that we actually act on it when you can. And so if you have a registrar who says to you, you know what, I would have loved to have had more time in the theatre working on procedures with Dr. X, Y, and Z. And is there any way that could have been or could be built into my appointment profile? I'm happy to mark out 5 or 6 appointments on the Friday afternoon when that doctor does theatre, if that gives me more exposure to that type of work. And if you can do that, then that's a really good example of what you can offer prospective people. I think that it's really important that we show that we trust and respect the registrar's opinions, and that does give an indication of the type of practice that you are, that you're not, set in stone and just doing things your own way. Ensure you know your deal breakers, though. It's, if your practice is involved with aged care, you're doing after hours. Our practice is open 365 days of the year. Our registrars do weekends and public holidays. And we're not negotiating out of that. So if someone said, well, I don't want to do that and I won't apply to your practice if I have to do weekends or public holidays, it's okay, that's fine, that's your choice. So know what your deal breakers are And don't apologise for it. There's lots of streams to general practice, and they are an opportunity to learn. I think that the number of people who are moving out of aged care is just astounding. When I say out of aged care, I mean providing general practice services to aged care, when aged care is one of the biggest growth industries in the country. So you could make your entire general practice focused around aged care. And if you've got a practice that's going to introduce you to that and support you as you learn, then that's fantastic. So I think that all the different variety of care models provide opportunities to learn. And it's important that you phrase it that way rather than apologise for it. It's very important that the registrar understands the value of what you're offering. And this is something that unless we explain it to them, they don't get it. So firstly, what is your practice billing profile? All percentages are based on something. And so it's very important for the registrars to understand that when we're looking at a percentage, it's a percentage of something. So average fee per patient is a really good metric, and understanding what the basic item 23 charge at your practice is will give them some understanding of the importance of comparing that when they're comparing the percentage that you are offering as part of the remuneration package. Having an examiner, either past or present as a supervisor, really that is gold for a registrar who's perhaps in their first, second, or even third semester, because those examiners have got a really great insight into what the colleges are looking for and how to best prepare for those exams. I think it's really important that we ensure that the registrars explain the value of having nursing staff on site. Often when I'm talking to the registrars, I'll say to them, when they're looking for their forever practice, having nursing staff on site is worth an extra 1 or 2% in the service fee. And I always use the example of the 4-year-old triplets. So if you as a doctor need to provide the immunisations to those 4-year-olds, it could take you 45 minutes to do so, because triplet 2 and 3 have seen what you've just done to their brother or sister and they've bolted because they don't want those immunos. So being able to handle those types of services over to the nursing staff is really valuable for the registrar, because they can see more patients, which gives them more training, but also the opportunity to earn more money. And so therefore, that's one reason why perhaps you may not be negotiating on the percentage. And admin support is really important too. If you've got someone who can help get specialist appointments for your patients, that takes so much pressure off the registrars and allows them to continue on with their day. I'm just going to stop here because we did have some polls there, and I'll also give Jen the opportunity to see if there's any questions that we need to address on camera. But Jane, can you just put those first polls up for us, please? So first poll question, have you ever missed out? So was there a time when you were looking for a registrar and you had capacity but you didn't match? Just give a minute. We've got just over half of the people have responded so far. Yeah, that's a pretty big number, isn't it? 50% of practices are indicating that at some stage they've had capacity for a registrar and they've missed out. And that impacts not only you for that initial semester, but also the future. because that registrar that you've missed out on is somebody who potentially could have stayed in your practice long term. Thanks for sharing that. Jane, could we share this? So there's the second poll. So how confident are you that you're going to be able to attract applications and match with a registrar in the upcoming placement process? So the one that we are just about to commence. So there's a big spread there too. So it's good to see that there's nobody who is not at all confident. So we've all got a level of confidence there. And most people are being fairly conservative and saying that they're fairly confident. There's some practices out there who obviously have had great success in the past and they are either very or extremely confident, which is good. For those of you who are not very confident, I hope that at the end of today you feel a little bit more confident. Thanks for that, Jane, for those two polls. We are going to come back to this poll, not in exactly the same format, but a similar question at the end to see whether or not what we're talking about today has actually improved your confidence as being able to attract an applicant going forward. So thanks for that, Jane. Will you take that down or will I take that down? I've taken that down, I think. Jen, was there anything that you would like to add to what I have whizzed through so far, or any questions that we're getting a theme on?
Just the 30,000 applying to GPT-1 only.
Correct.
So, yep.
Yes.
So that's new starting in 2026, isn't it?
That's correct. So if they're already in the system and they've missed out, it's only for new registrars, either starting full-time or part-time for 2026.1.
Yeah.
However, the study leave and the paid parental leave are all registrars, regardless of where they're at in their training, will be eligible for those.
And just one other thing is that we have, as well as Magella from RACGP, we have Debbie from ACRM. And just to let everyone know that if there are particular ACRM questions, to reach out to your TPA or use and we'll put this in the webinar resources at the end, or use the practice support at acram.org.au for any questions for ACRM.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you so much, Debbie and Magella. It makes such a difference having someone here who's got that insight. And the different acronyms. So we've got TPAs at ACRM, is that correct? And TCs at RACGP. So as we all know, general practice is the world of acronyms, and it takes you quite some time to get onto them. Okay, what else might be considered an asset or something that's attractive to a registrar that you're not thinking about in that light? So your social media presence, online bookings, it's really important if you've got them that the registrar's aware of that. If you have a social media presence, use it. Introduce your registrars to your patients, whether it be on your website, your Facebook page, and introduce them as, I think it's really important that we introduce them as people, not just here's another doctor. So putting their interests outside medicine, giving people the opportunity to connect is really important. So I know that in the past we have done interviews and, there's been some really silly questions like, what would your pet say is your best attribute? Just to put a little bit of a light offering on. But, if someone's really interested in traveling or they're a foodie or they love gardening, they play a musical instrument, they play a sport, that sort of thing is really, really valuable when patients are looking for someone that they want to connect with. So anything that your registrar's happy to share about themselves that you can use to advertise them is a wonderful thing. It's really important that your practice culture is something that you can use as an advertisement. You may only have one or two, or you may only have two supervisors in your practice. but how many other people are happy to step in and answer questions? So, you know, if you've got multiple supervisors, but they don't all supervise at the same time, but they're happy to have you knock on the door, that's something that's really attractive to a registrar, especially after those first 4 or 6 weeks when they may no longer have 100% on-site supervision from their supervisor all the time. Knowing that there's someone else there that they can knock on the door rather than actually having to ring their supervisor on their day off is really, really important, and it provides a great safety net for them. Potential future opportunities are really important to registrars too. So have you got ex-registrars who are now working from your practice? I don't know about you. I've been in the same job now for 25 years. I am a creature of habit. The thought of moving every 6 months or 12 months would freak me out now. And the idea that perhaps I could, you know, work from this practice and then come back or stay on would be very attractive to me. And I think for the registrars, knowing that potentially there is that opportunity, that you're not just a practice that churns through and you're never seen again, is something that is attractive and may offer value. Social interactions are really important. No one just wants to go to work. It's great to have the opportunity to catch up with people in a social environment, and that might be a Christmas party. It might be that you get together for lunch once a fortnight. It might be that you have bike rides. Make sure you mention this sort of stuff in your practice profile and also in your interview process. And if it's something that the ex-registrars have enjoyed, get them to include it in their testimonial. You know, that I've got a registrar at the moment, and he loves the fact that we have lunch every fortnight offered, and that it's different every fortnight. So this week we're doing build your own sandwiches. You know, it's nothing special, but the fact that he doesn't have to think about lunch on Friday, says, "Oh, it's so nice to come in and someone else has made my lunch for me." Something simple that you might not think is attractive, but he loves it. And he started with us at GPT-1 and he's come back to GPT-4. Don't think it was only the lunches that brought him back, but it was certainly something that he has expressed made us different from other places that he's worked. And ongoing education, so clinical meetings and CPD, if you offer it, please make sure that you share that, because if you're helping the doctors meet their CPD requirements on an ongoing basis, then it shows a commitment to the GPs that are working from your practice. It also shows a commitment to clinical excellence. And I think that everyone wants to work in a place that is offering clinical excellence. Rural and remote practices sometimes struggle to attract registrars because the registrars don't want to move too far away from what might be their home base. But you've also got a lot of opportunities to differentiate and make your differentiation known. So some of these things are expensive and some of them are about culture. So if you are rural or remote, if you offer assistance with relocation, and when I say assistance there, I'm probably meaning not that you're going to go with a truck and help move their furniture, but that you might offer a relocation subsidy. Let the prospective registrars know that. Some country practices have subsidised housing, so they may actually have a unit or a house that they offer for the registrars so that they don't have to pack up their bed and their kitchen utensils. The practices actually provide that for them. If that's you, that is an amazing selling point. So really, really sell it. And you don't have to have the fanciest whiz-bang rose gold matching toaster and kettle. Just something that's neat, tidy and clean is just an amazing thing to be able to offer. Community orientation and introduction. So knowing where the local schools are, what the local sporting clubs are, what the local churches are of all different denominations. We can't assume anything about our registrars in relation to cultural diversity. So knowing where people of different faith are able to practice within your area is really important. And once again, some of this is just showing that you actually care, that you've put your homework, you've put the effort into doing your homework. And long weekends, when I say long weekend, I know a lot of registrars who practice in the country still have family and partners in town or their main place of residence. So if you can offer them a 4-day week so that they have that 3 days to go home and see family, that may make you stand out a little bit more. I know that can be difficult, especially if your practice is open 9 to 5. It's hard. You can't get 36 hours or 38 hours into 9 to 5 over 4 days. However, if there's some flexibility for doing after hours work, aged care in the evenings, perhaps an earlier start in the mornings, admin time being conducted out of opening hours, so they may come in half an hour early when the receptionists are setting up in order to do their admin. Trying to be a little bit flexible and perhaps a little bit creative and thinking outside the square just may help you put together a package that is desirable for somebody. So, with all of that, what can you do above the NTCER, or what might you want to do above the NTCER that will make your package more attractive to a registrar? So, a higher base rate can be offered. So, the NTCER is the minimum. However, you can negotiate above that. So a higher base rate, if you think that the registrar is going to generate above the minimum and is going to be getting a top up, having a higher base rate is actually no risk to you. I would be very, very careful though not to offer a higher base rate for a GPT1 because you do know that they do take a long time to get going and therefore you would be potentially financially at risk if you did that in GPT1. But if you've got someone who's lacking in confidence, not sure that they're going to attract a lot of patients, concerned about the longevity and the patient loyalty to the other doctors, offering them a higher base rate might just give them a little bit of a confidence and a safety mesh and get them over the line to join you. Educational release is an area that Jen and I just cringe whenever we get an inquiry about educational release for part-time registrars. It is an area of confusion and a potential area for conflict. So the NTCER states that if a registrar is doing part-time training, then the practice is only required to release them on the same fraction for educational release. However, the colleges encourage the registrars to do their educational release on a full-time basis. So you've got a part-time 0.5 GPT1 who's got 10 educational release days in that first semester. You only have to release them for 5 because they're 0.5. So you only have to release them for half. But the college and the registrar are both going to want them to go to all of those educational release days. So it is something that you could consider offering over and above their entitlement. You might say, you know what, we're going to let you go to all those educational release days and we'll pay them as normal hours. You might say, we'll split the difference with you and we'll offer you an extra 2.5 days. You can be creative with this and it will earn you brownie points if you make sure that they are aware that you're offering something over and above. With anything that you offer over and above, make sure that the registrar is aware of it. You don't want to be putting your hand in your pocket or providing other types of resources and not get any goodwill for it, because that's actually not going to to achieve what it is that you're hoping to achieve. That will just set the next practice up to be compared against you and to be found lacking. So if you're paying above the NTCER base rate, and then they go off to the next place and they say, oh, you're underpaying me. It's like, no, actually, the first practice was paying you more. It is really important that you make sure that the registrars are aware that you're paying them higher than that you need to. And flexibility, if you can offer it, it's a great thing to do. We had one registrar who said, and this is a real example, I take my niece to basketball training on Monday nights. It's a really important part of her life and my life that we spend this time together. Can I please finish at 4 o'clock on Mondays? And we made that work. It was a bit of a pain. Sometimes we might have been able to use those after school appointments. But at the end of the day, it was really important to her and we were able to make it work. And so it was a win-win because 8 or 10 years on, she's still practicing from our practice. So if you have the flexibility to be able to meet needs, then do so. If you don't do it. Totally opposite situation last year. Someone said, oh, you bossed me on Thursday nights, but I actually play badminton sometimes socially on Thursday nights. You know, is there any chance I could finish earlier or swap? And from a business operational perspective, we needed GPs on a Thursday night, and this was a GPT-3, and we actually had to say, we're really sorry, there's just nothing we can do about that, and we really need you here on a Thursday night. But when he applied for his GPT-4 position, we asked him if he'd like to change, because at that point in time, we could change him onto another night. And he said, no, it's okay. I've changed my social badminton now. It's all good. But being able to offer him that, I think, was valuable, even though he didn't take it up. He knew that we were aware of his, his social requirements, and he knew that we had remembered it and that we respected it as something that was important to him. Other areas that you can negotiate or offer above the NTCER are a more frequent top-up calculation. So the NTCER states no less frequently than monthly. There's nothing to stop you from doing fortnightly, weekly, 4-weekly, 3-weekly if you want to. You can do any cycle that you like as long as it is no less frequently than monthly, because the shorter the cycle, the greater the financial advantage to the registrar. I would never suggest doing something that doesn't tie in with your payroll cycle. If you're paying all your staff fortnightly, to do weekly top-ups for your registrar means that you're putting a significant burden on your payroll person. And if they are outsourced, then that's a cost to you. And even if they're in-house, it's still a cost because they're doing an extra pay run every week. But it is something that you can offer. Using billings rather than receipts. The NTCER has been changed to ensure that if there are errors and reversals and rebillings, that the registrar's not getting paid on both the reversed and the corrected billing. So it makes it very clear that if something is charged and you have to fix up a registrar's, might not be the registrar's error, but an error, say it's a care plan and the patient is registered at another practice for My Medicare, so you need to reverse that care plan billing and put it through as an item 44. Only the item 44 gets included in the billings. The reversal comes out. So using billings rather than receipts smooths the registrar's income, and it means that they're getting paid for the work they've done. Because at the end of the day, collecting fees is our job. They're not there to do that admin. That's our responsibility as practice managers. So using billings can be very just one step that's a little bit more attractive. It takes the risk out from the registrar's perspective. It also means that we don't have to do calculations at 3 and 6 months post them leaving, and potentially having them within our payroll system for another financial year. It also means that our batching and our internal processes aren't going to have a negative impact on the registrar. I've had situations where we've had registrars contact us to say that practices didn't put through billings until after the registrar was on annual leave. And so therefore there was a negative impact on the registrar's income because those receipts went through whilst the registrar was on annual leave rather than the week before when the work was done. And whether or not that was done on purpose, it left a really bad taste in the registrar's mouth because they actually felt like the practice had manipulated their internal processes to financially disadvantage the registrar. So if you can take away any opportunity for any impact that may be unintended, then that's a good thing to do. So I just think that now that billings has been defined to be net of any errors, it makes life much easier, and I would always go that way. You may be able to differentiate visit types and offer a higher percentage for things like nursing home visits. So if you're able to use the registrar's room for another doctor whilst the registrar's out at the nursing home, you could consider offering them, instead of 44.79, you might offer them 50%. You might offer them 55% on those nursing home visits. Just remember, anything that you offer as far as a registrar's percentage, you are paying superannuation on top of that. So just be aware that it is any percentage that you put in a contract does have to have super on top. It cannot be superannuation inclusive. And even if you make the error, the registrar is allowed to rely on that being superannuation exclusive, and you will have to wear the additional cost. Okay. GPT-1s. Not every practice likes taking GPT-1s. They're a lot of work. But it might, if you've struggled to attract a registrar in the past, taking a GPT-1 may actually be a really good investment for you. As I've mentioned, the AGPT program is oversubscribed for 2026.1, and that means there's a whole lot of GPT-1s coming into the system. So if you haven't taken GPT-1s before, it might be worth considering taking them this semester coming up. Just put your toe in the water. Although you have to teach them everything from scratch, you know, these doctors have come out of the hospital where they've had lots of people around them, probably always had somebody right next to them that they can ask a question to, and all of a sudden you're putting them in a 12-metre square room and they're on their own, and they've got to bill and they've got to consider the cost to the patient of every test that they order, something very different from what they've had in the hospital system. It is a lot of work. You have to start from scratch with them, and it takes a long time before they're moving from one patient an hour to maybe 3 patients every 2 hours. You're not going to earn a lot of money from a GPT-1, regardless of the amount of the practice payment that you receive. And you do receive, I won't say not an insignificant payment under the national consistent payments for GPT-1, but it is worth the effort, especially if you get them to come back at the end of their training and stay with you. You are their first experience into general practice. If you put the time and the effort in, you can have somebody who is not only very thankful for the effort that you've put in, but also works the way that you work, understands that your practice policies and your clinical excellence is the benchmark. And that's what they want to be working in a practice that's as good as yours. And it might just mean that they come back to you. So If you haven't thought about it before or you think it's a bit scary, put your toe in the water. I'm pretty sure that the colleges will be very, very thankful to have practices putting their hands up for GPT-1s. Flexibility versus rigidity. I think that anyone else who is in this webinar who is of my generation, we are looking at the younger generation thinking, oh, they're so entitled and they ask for everything, and I'm just going to be stubborn and say, you know what, it's my way or the highway. I don't think you're doing yourself any good by doing that. The younger generation, as I call them, I have children who are in that age, same age as the registrars who are coming through. They've been taught to stand up for themselves. They've been taught and encouraged to advocate for themselves. And respecting that and being able to be flexible when you can could just get you over the line. But as I said, don't sell your soul. If it's a deal breaker, it's a deal breaker. But if you can work with somebody to make it a win-win situation, then do so. The payback will be huge. And think about how the registrar sees you. Are you really invested in them? If you've just got a list of tick questions that you are going through and they can tell that you're not actually listening to the answer, or regardless of how many times you ask their opinion, you're not actually listening and you're not going to take any action based on their opinion, they will know. They will know. They're very savvy. They've been given the opportunity to be, I think, more critical in a different sense, not looking down on people, but to really look into the way people are treating them or acting with them, and to read into it what they will. Whereas I was told to sit in the corner and be quiet and to be seen and not heard. That's not the way it is now. They want to be heard and they should be heard. Because at the end of the day, younger doctors are the future of our practices. Okay, so where can we help other than what we've presented today? So the NTCER compliant contracts. If you're not using the NTCER compliant contracts that you can download from either GPSA or GPRA, they're exactly the same contracts now, they're co-branded. We can't help you in the future. So if you have a contractual, when I say we can't help you, we can't help you if there's a contractual concern. You use the client contracts that we have on our websites. Then if there's an issue regarding something that's in that contract down the line, Jen, myself, Jane, Maurice, one of the cast of thousands at GPSA, when I say cast of thousands, those four, that's it for us. We can help you if you're using that template, but if you're not, then unfortunately we can't go through everyone's contracts to understand the differences. Now, at the moment, they are as up to date as they can be. We are waiting for the Minister to sign off on those incentives that we mentioned at the beginning of the webinar. The incentives are not employment entitlements. However, the contracts will certainly have a comment in relation to practices not unreasonably denying access to study leave. So that's certainly something that we will need to be aware of. It's something that you can ask in the interviews. The federal government is introducing 5 days study leave per year. Do you intend to access that in this upcoming semester? And if so, what might you be accessing it for? So if you've got a GPT-3 that you're someone going into GPT-3, I can guarantee they're probably going to take those 5 days study leave to prepare for exams, or to be out of the workplace prior to the exams, so that they've got clear they've got a clear mind. They haven't just had a terrible presentation the night before they're sitting their exam. So you can ask about study leave. I would never, ever, ever ask if someone anticipates accessing the paid parental leave, though. Please be very careful of making sure that you do meet all the Fair Work requirements in relation to what you can and can't ask in an interview. And paid parental leave is one thing that I would steer clear of completely. Onboarding resources. So we've got the orientation checklist. Sometimes it's really good to look at those before you're even interviewing to see whether there's things in there that you might be able to highlight to the registrar and use one another. There's 62 people in this webinar at the moment. There will be other people who couldn't make it today who are watching a recording later on. Every single one of you has joined the GPSA community in order to be able to register for this webinar. If you are a practice manager, join the practice managers group and you will have access to 600 and what are we on, Jen? 641? Something like that, 641 practice managers who can all get on and help you with any questions that you might have. You can talk to one another privately. It doesn't have to be a public post. You can actually go and if you know someone's name, you can send them a private message, just like using DM on Facebook, but it's not going to get any other algorithms who, not all of a sudden going to start getting advertisements for something that you've mentioned in your chat. So please use that community of practice. There is a wealth of knowledge. Jen knows a hell of a lot. I know a bit, but between the 641 of us, I'm sure that every single question can be answered. So please use one another. It's a great resource and it is underutilised. I think that we could all be getting much more value out of that if we shared our knowledge with one another. And share your vulnerability too. Actually asking a question is a sign of strength. It's not a sign of weakness. Admitting that you don't know something actually gives someone else the power to also ask a question that you might be able to help with. So please put your questions out there. This is our community of platform. They're all over the country. We've actually got some international people, so please use us. Jen and I will be at the AAPM conference in Melbourne in 2 weeks' time. Carla, Bruce and Sarah will be at RMA 25 in Perth, which is at the same time as the AAPM conference. And Bruce, Trishi, Candice and myself will be in Brisbane at GP 25. So if you are at any of those places and you'd like to have a one-on-one catch-up with us, please come and see us at the GPSA stands. Coming soon to a desktop near you will be some opportunities for further professional development. Jen has been working hard on this for months and hopefully soon we will have something that you can complete, which will give you a certificate in AGPT training practice management, something that nobody else is offering. So thanks, Jen, for all your hard work in putting that together. Thank you, everybody. I hope that it has been beneficial. Have a great day.
Thanks for watching. We'd love your feedback. Please comment or subscribe to our YouTube channel for updates on new videos. If you'd like to ask a question or suggest a topic, you can contact us via our website at gpsa.org.au. GP Supervision Australia is supported by funding from the Australian Government under the Australian General Practice Training Program.